wasn't always easy to be a smart Black girl.
It was absolutely not easy at all.
Ms. Deborah Horne has never done things the easy way, and thank goodness she's made her career being brave and bold and brilliant, first as a newspaper reporter, then on television. How about going from print to broadcast? What was that transition like for you?
Horrifying.
But during 10 years in Providence, Rhode Island, and 35 at Cairo TV in Seattle, she has pocketed multiple awards, including Emmys and the Grand Dame, the Gracie Award. And she has done it with such distinction and command and grace. Even Hollywood came calling.
So then he said, hold on a minute. And then out comes Robin Williams, right? Well, I did not expect that.
She's made a career of defying expectations. That smart Black girl became a local legend, writing the first draft of history with people who have changed the world. Would Rosa Parks also qualify as your favorite interview?
Favorite interview? No.
And telling the stories you never knew you needed to hear. Who would that be?
That would be these women in Rhode Island who went on strike against their husbands. Yes, they did.
Success is messy, and this is what it looks like. Hit and Miss is about really successful people and their mistakes. You have to keep taking your best shot again and again, and it is going to be hit and miss. Hey everybody, I'm Monique Minglavin. Thank you so much for coming back to Hit and Miss. My first day at Cairo 7, a fellow reporter walked by and said, "Oh, they put you in the diva den." Ms. Deborah Horne was my neighbor. She had a regal bearing and impeccable grammar, but her laughter could also fill a room. And Deborah will knock on a tent to get the story of an unhoused person and then turn around and pin back the ears of a cagey government official. And she does it all with fairness and depth. And as lucky as I am to have her as a colleague, I am blessed to have her as a friend. She has made history, she has recorded history. This diva has done it all, and she wears it so well. You'd think it was preordained, but she really had to fight for it, even though her path was first blessed in the house of God. When I got here 18 years ago, I was struck by this, and I still feel it today, that you're an incredibly smart and tough reporter. So my first question for you is, when did you realize first that you were smart?
Oh, wow. No one's ever asked me that. When I was a little girl,
Yeah?
people seemed to think I was smart.
Why?
Well, because I guess what I had that seemed like I was smart was a boldness in a sense. So I started giving speeches as a little girl.
Did you?
I did.
To whom?
Well, in church. And this is why the Black church is so significant. I'm not much of a church goer now, but the significance of it was, and I give it credit for helping me realize that I had a good voice, that I spoke well. I mean, when you're 8 years old and you're talking to people, I remember once I was saying something and then I corrected myself in the middle. I said, no, that's not right. I'm going to start over. And the applause, the acclaim that one received, I mean, there is no group that is more on your side than the people in the church that you're in if you're a little girl.
No
a little
kidding. And
child.
they applauded you because you stopped yourself and started over?
They thought that was bold and brave, which didn't necessarily seem bold and brave to me. And the fact that I could talk at all at that age in front of them seemed to knock their socks off.
It is pretty extraordinary. Do you remember what you were talking to them about?
I don't remember what I was talking to them about. I just remember that I had to go up and make a speech of some sort, but I didn't think of it as a speech. I just thought of it as talking to them. So I don't recall, but I also had parents who made no secret, particularly my father, for better or for worse, for better for me, but not so great for my younger sibling, that I was the cat's meow, you know, that I was born, therefore I was great. So I thought a lot of my intellect because of him, as much as anything, because he seemed to think I was smart, they seemed to think I was smart, and people seemed so startled that I was able to do things which to me felt ordinary. Because I'm 8, I'm 9, I'm 10, I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't even know what the bar is. There is no bar. There's no standard. I'm talking, and they're acting like I've done something extraordinary. So
you weren't nervous from what you
not at
remember?
all. I became nervous with time.
With with time and with circumstance. Debbie's nerves got frayed later in high school. In many ways, confident, curious, and adventurous little Debbie Horne was ahead of her time. But she was also of her time, a time that wasn't quite ready for her.
I will tell you the one time I was nervous. I graduated first in my high school class, and I was with the largest group of Blacks to integrate my high school, and graduated first. I was valedictorian. And that year was 1971. And I was dating somebody, and there weren't that many Black kids at predominantly white high schools who were graduating first throughout the country. There just weren't that many. And there was a young woman, same age, we were graduating the same year, in Mississippi, I believe. I grew up in Virginia, and someone tried to shoot her, or something terrible happened that you wouldn't be surprised by, in the sense that it's a fraught time. She's representing something that people perhaps didn't think was possible, that you're Black and that you're smart enough. And believe me, there were two sides of that coin, but to be graduating valedictorian. And he told me about it. I had not heard it, I had not read it. And I was so frightened. That was the only time I was frightened giving any speech or being in public or speaking publicly, because why couldn't it have happened to me?
Debbie was forged in that crucible, encouraged and driven to achieve excellence, while also knowing that it could put a bullseye on her back.
It was absolutely not easy at all, except in my family, except for my parents. I mean, without them, who knows what I would have done, but they were so completely on my side. But it was also a time of great turmoil in civil rights in this country, and my father was a big activist. And so I was an activist at high school as well, but also still making good grades. And so because I made good grades and then ultimately became valedictorian, the Black kids, many of them said I must be an Uncle Tom, which is a suggestion that they have begun to believe what the larger society has said, which is you're just not smart enough to do well. And I thought that won't last any longer, but it still happens even today. And so I was mistreated by Black students because they said I had caved in, I was succumbing to the way that white people wanted us to be. And then for whites, they said I was an angry person because I was also fighting for the rights that we had to fight for in school, even at that time. And so when I graduated from high school, I went to the doctor and he said I had higher than normal blood pressure for an 18-year-old. And so that, I think, was because of the twin position.
She also realized that no matter the height she achieved, some would still look down on her. It helped her grow calluses personally and muscles professionally.
I was dating for a brief time a guy who was a star football player in high school. We were both the same age. And here I was graduating first in my class, and he was a star running back. And, you know, Wayne Bullock, great, great football player. And when we were together, men particularly, would fall to the floor over this 18-year-old who they just regarded as the greatest of all time. And here I was graduating first in my high school class. Oh yeah, But Wayne, you know, and so I think in some ways my life has always been, and it certainly is the case as a reporter, I can see very clearly the great of something and then see how that very same something can be demeaned or not regarded as highly as it is in one venue. And so I think the resilience has come from that. So if I could survive Newport News High School and go on to get, you know, an undergraduate degree, then a graduate degree, then I could have people, when I'm going to cover a story, not want to talk to me because of my race. And so no big deal. Been there, felt that, you know?
Gotten through that.
Gotten through that. And this to me is the most important thing. And never losing sight of the goal. For instance, I covered a story once, and we were covering what is still the longest strike in U.S. history, involving a company that it's a manufacturing company. And when we go in, they're about to start the foundry. And I put my hand out to shake the owner's hand, and he does not shake my hand. There is nothing more unsettling than having your hand out and it's not shaken. But he shook very vigorously my photographer's hand.
In that moment, you put your hand out. You know why he's not shaking your hand.
I do.
And how do you react?
I observed it.
Huh.
I observed it because it was 3 o'clock.
You had a deadline.
And they started that foundry up one time a day,
Ah,
and it was now. And I mean, I had to do my story.
yeah.
What am I going to do? Go to the boss and say, oh, he wouldn't shake my hand, so I refused to do the story? No, I wasn't going to do that. And what was interesting about it was, as we talked, he started telling me things about, I really struggled to get goggles. The black workers, their noses are so wide, and so you can't really get a goggle that fits it well. And I said, well, that is a problem. And I'm not being facetious.
Uh-huh.
That actually is a problem. It's a solvable problem, but it is a problem. And the more that he talked, the friendlier he got toward me. And by the end, he was shaking my hand. And I really didn't do anything. I didn't apologize. I didn't say anything except just listen to him. And so what I learned in that moment was it is possible to listen even to somebody who has done something offensive and still not stoop to their level, because I could have, I suppose, become enraged but I was working. I mean, if I hadn't been working, if I had been off, maybe I would have given him the lecture, but I was working.
So part of what got you through that moment was you had the goal of turning the story that day.
Absolutely.
What made you decide that your goal was to be a journalist in particular?
Boy, my mother said I always wanted to be in the know, which I never thought of, but I certainly think that's the case.
I think she's right. I've never met her, but I think she's right.
And then I want to tell it.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I don't want to just be in the know. Oh, no, do not tell me a secret. As my father would say, if it's a secret, why can't you keep it? Don't ask me to keep your secret because I cannot do it.
And television helped pull back the curtain, giving new insights into the people who captivated little Debbie Horne, including the country's young, charismatic president, suited to the television age, whose charms and whose tragedies were broadcast.
I was 10 years old when President Kennedy was assassinated. And that was the first time I had watched television. Television would go off at midnight and then come back on at whatever time it came back on. And during that period, it stayed on around the clock. And we were glued to it because he was the first president I realized was president.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago.
And I loved Walter Cronkite, and we as a family loved him, and we watched him, and we watched the entirety of the events. And my mother said, well, we went to a funeral today, because that's how we felt. It was on every day from that day until the funeral, and then television went back to being off at midnight. And it was then that I decided that I wanted to do that.
Huh.
And I changed my mind many times.
Did you?
Well, my family didn't want me to be a journalist.
Why?
Because I'm smart, I'm black. They want me to be a doctor. They want me to be a lawyer. I mean, they were really adamant about that. That's what they wanted.
And did you give in to that for a little bit?
I did not, because
Okay.
I thought about it. One of my uncles asked me, who did I admire? And I said, I admire Martin Luther King, Walter Cronkite, and Billy Graham. And what I admired about them was their ability to captivate an audience, their ability to speak.
Yeah.
And he said, well, what about your Uncle Jeff, who was a doctor? And I said, well, I like him, but you asked for my list. My list. That's my list. But I could never, I could never do something that I wasn't passionate about.
How about going from print to broadcast? What was that transition like for you?
Horrifying.
Why?
Because when I was a print reporter, I didn't have to think about how I looked, how I sounded, and newspaper reporters are trying to get all of the information. And that is why I started reading the New York Times, because they would answer questions that I never thought to ask. In television, you don't have the time time in every way, because time is our enemy. How much time does it take to get to where we have to go? How much time can we spend on that interview? How much time before we have to stop and take lunch? Or how much time before we have to do our teas? How long can it be? What time do we appear, you know?
So what were some of the bumpier moments going from print to broadcast?
Oh, as they said, I looked scared on TV.
Oh,
Oh,
were you
yes.
scared?
I think I was scared. I think I was scared. Oh my gosh.
So how did you overcome the fear?
By doing it.
Just day after day?
Day after day after day.
Did it
after day.
gradually melt
It
away?
gradually melted
okay.
away. It's not that I don't have, I mean, obviously there are times when I can be more nervous when I'm doing a story, if I'm live, it just depends, but rarely. But no, it smiles on the skis, I always say. It's just doing it.
There is something about you that makes people talk. And I mean that in a way that sometimes it's a decision. They trust you, they want to speak. Other times I feel like they think, I have to answer this woman.
Do you ever think about your prostate?
No, ma'am.
I have seen both at work. Is that something you think about? How you're going to get someone to talk?
When I can think of a million reasons why they won't talk, and I will not give them any of those reasons, but I can think of reasons that they won't talk, then what I hope I do is I always believe that everybody I'm talking to is equal. And so I don't talk to children like they're children. I don't talk to people who are unhoused like they're unhoused. And I've had people say, I can't believe you spoke to them that way. Well, I like to think that I have been guided by one part of a poem by Rudyard Kipling. The poem is If. But he says in that poem, if you can walk with kings, yet never lose the common touch. And at the end of all of these ifs, he says, you will be a man, my son. And that is how I feel. So when I interview the governor, I treat him the same way I treat a woman living in a motel who heard something that I did not hear, but only she can tell me, because they're equal to me.
Do you remember any experiences that taught you what you're just talking about, that you need to approach people with the same kind of humanity?
And I had to learn humility, but I always say life is the greatest teacher of that. And so when I've had people say, well, she thinks so much of herself, I say, you know what? God bless her, because life is going to knock her right off her behind, and then we'll know what she's made of. We'll know what's there. So no, I couldn't be taught it, but life has taught it to me. Life has had me fall and pick myself up.
Tell me about a time when you were knocked down.
Oh, gosh. Well, I would say this is an example of me being knocked down, at least to me, because I tell you, I want to be the best. And when I was a new television reporter, I would be at a news conference and I would say, Governor, there was a space between governor and my question, and then somebody would enter that space and ask the question. Oh my God. And then one time the governor of Rhode Island, the Governor Garrahy, said, oh, come on, guys, give her a chance. Oh, my gosh, that was humiliating to me. And I said, I have got to figure this out. There is a way to do it, and I don't know what to do. What was I doing? I was seeking permission. I was saying, Governor, and I would get his attention, and somebody else would get in there. But that does not happen. Governor, I start asking my question, and people talk over you, and you keep asking your question, and then they stop. And then you take a breath. So I've given away my secret. That's my secret.
Well, again, some things you have to learn for yourself, and you have learned and mastered it. Is there a time that you remember where there was a question you wish you would have asked and you didn't?
I'll tell you this. I interviewed Rosa Parks. I interviewed her, and I wish that I had been older. And I wish I had known better or more. I mean, I knew how important she was. I knew the importance that she'd had in my life as an African American, in the lives of my parents. I knew this, but I just thought I was interviewing an old lady, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I learned a lot in that interview, but I should have been bowing to her. You know, I should have been saying, my God, when I tell people I've interviewed Rosa Parks, I now get this same reaction of, what? And I just acted like, she's just an old lady I'm talking to, you know? I mean, I know who she is. I know how important she is. I know her place in history. But I shouldn't have even been able to ask her any questions. I should have been so blown away by it.
So she would like a do-over there, but in Debbie's long and impactful career, that same instinct has served her and her audience well.
Then the children from Rwanda started coming.
To find the extraordinary in the ordinary, and also to find the everyday in the elevated. Well, we're getting a window into the many experiences that have made Ms. Deborah Horne, and have given you a certain bearing, a certain presence that I can't help but think led your path to Robin Williams.
Well, that is quite a segue, Ms. Ming Lovin.
Tell me about that experience.
Oh, I tell you, that was the greatest gift. That is how I see it. I got a blind email from somebody saying, it said Robin Williams in the headline. I was in the live truck with my photographer, and I said, get a load of this. It said, we're casting a movie with Robin Williams. Are you interested in being a cast? I said, and my photographer, Roland Bailey, said, can you, this is a fake. Some scammer is after me. And he said, well, you gotta say I'm interested. I said, okay, I'll write that. I'm interested.
That was your response?
That's right. And then the person wrote back and said, great. I said, oh my gosh, this is real? And so then I said, okay, well, I guess I do have to act like I care somewhat, because I was like, girl, you have a good life. So then we meet in a school, and then there was a guy sitting who looked like Robin Williams, and I remember thinking, gosh, he doesn't look a thing like he does young people say to me on TV. But it wasn't he, it was his double, his stunt double, or whatever double is. So then out comes Bobcat Goldthwait. He says, I've been reading a lot about you. I said, I've been reading a lot about you too. He said, don't do that, So then we started bantering. And so then he said, hold on a minute. And then out comes Robin Williams, right? Well, I did not expect that. That was the real one, not the fake guy who's his place setter. And I said, and when I'm nervous, and I did become nervous then, I always ask a question. That's how I relax. So I said,
You're a
it wasn't
reporter.
so it wasn't even, listen, it wasn't the question of the century. It was like, how are you doing or something? And he said, well, I'm here in this magnificent city. I said, where do you live? He said, San Francisco. He said, okay. I live in a pretty fantastic city too. And that's when Bobcat said, stop. I was worried you were going to be starstruck. And he said, and then he turned to her or somebody and said, I want to make this happen. And I said to Catherine, my best friend, I said, oh, that's just Hollywood speak for don't call us, we'll call you. She said, no, I don't know. I don't think he would say it like that. I said, I think he said it like that. And I was in a truck with Roland Bailey again when I got the email, which I still have, that said, you got the part.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, wow.
What was your,
I was speechless.
Debbie was cast as Dr. Dana, a television talk show host in the 2009 movie World's Greatest Dad. Her scene lasted just a handful of minutes, but a head full of memories.
When I was shooting the movie, it was like a day in television. You would have felt like that too, except for one really important thing. I had my own trailer. With the name Dr. Dana on it. And I was in the trailer. I mean, what do you do in a trailer? I'm just sitting there, and I had to go to the bathroom. So I come out and I say to someone there, I say, I need to use the bathroom. And I don't know where one is. She says, is there something wrong with the bathroom in your trailer? Oops. I'd never been in a trailer. I'd never been in a movie trailer. How would I know? And I go back, oh my God, my own bathroom. It was the most remarkable thing. And so then it's hurry up and wait.
Hurry up and wait to shoot what turned out to be a very emotional scene. Dr. Dana interviews Robin Williams' character who lost his son to suicide.
And as for Robin Williams, so now he was very lovely to me when I met him. And in fact, he took my hand and he kissed it and said, it's an honor. For you? Okay, sure. To meet Deborah Horne. Yeah, I get that. You're just Robin Williams. Exactly. And so, but now when we were on the set, he was not as generous as all that.
Oh.
Until he flubbed his line. And then the woman, she said, Robin, I mean, she might have said, Mr. Williams, it says here that you're supposed to say this. She didn't say, you messed up.
Right.
And I said, yes, it does. And I said, and I was trying, I heard him say it wrong, and this is true. I suddenly was on television, I suddenly was working with my co-anchor, and I was trying to figure out a way to get him on the right track, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. And after that, he became my friend. And then he cried. So there was a scene where he cried, and that was spontaneous. And then when he cried, I was like, oh my God, I'm like, real, this is real. So I got the tissue to hand to him and all this, just like normal, because I forgot that we were acting.
Sorry.
But there was a lot brewing underneath.
Tragedy is, I didn't know until his death how sad he was. Or profound.
Here's a tissue for you. And then when he said cut, Robin said, thanks for going with me with that, because when people get involved in that kind of shit, you don't know where they're going. Talking about himself.
Yeah.
And then we were friends.
Oh,
Then he started telling
interesting.
me the things that he loved about his life. And the thing he said he loved the most was going and entertaining the troops. That gave him the greatest joy, he said, of all the things that he did.
Wow. That was a movie role. This is what people here are facing, but real tragedy is often at the center of her workday. Not under movie lights, but flashing ones. Going back to your day job, though,
Yes.
if you will, do you have a biggest mistake that you've made on the story?
Oh, I have. And and when you ask me, it makes my stomach hurt. It was a terrible crash that happened in Issaquah, I believe. And I hurriedly read through the document that we got from the State Patrol, and I thought that I was identifying the driver who was going to be accused of vehicular homicide, but I actually named the passenger who was not the driver, but he had the very same name as he was an Issaquah student, but he had the very same name as a child in Lake Stevens who was a big star, a football star who wanted to be a cop. And it was literally the same name. They didn't even know each other existed. And so I really regret that. And I regretted it not because of I regret always making any mistake, but I regretted that may have tainted that young man in a way that should not have occurred. But I regret that with everything that's in me because it was an unforced error. But since then, I have made sure that I don't do that. I just have to focus on my story.
Every reporter makes mistakes. Everyone has regrets.
I can't get it right.
But few have these triumphs. Deborah has earned multiple Emmys, induction into the Silver Circle of the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences Northwest Chapter.
Thank you, all of you.
And the Gracie Award for Outstanding Local Reporter from the Alliance for Women in Media Foundation.
Well, getting the Gracie was the highlight of my career,
Okay.
without question, because it was similar to the first Emmy I won. Next on Cairo in Color. And I won it for Cairo in Color, a show about people of color that was on the air for 18 years. And I did feel a bit like the actress Sally Field, like, not You Like Me, but I actually do know what I'm doing, because I do think that's the value of it, even though I think there's evidence that I know what I'm doing, but you just day to day doing the work, you don't always know that, and you need a moment. That was the highlight, because what I hope I've done in my career, my goal is to shine a light on places where the light has not shone. And so I want to talk to, not the governor, I want to talk to the unhoused person. I want to give that person a voice, because everybody has a story. It may not be a story that any of us wants to replicate, but it is their story, and it helps us know how they got to where they are. And it informs us about the human condition, about what's happening all around us. And so what I hope is that is the measure of my work. And that's why to win the Gracie was a national award, and it said local talent. And I felt like, wow, I have achieved something. Whether or not I ever got the Gracie, I would have achieved something. But let me tell you something, getting that award makes a difference.
What's your favorite mistake?
Oh my goodness. My favorite mistake, which again, is something that I learned from, was in interviewing Rosa Parks. We had just seen a skit about her that terrible day that, she crawled up on the bus. She puts her money in. She goes to her seat. She sits down. Oh, her feet hurt. Everything hurts. And then this big ugly white man comes up and says, "Get up." He's like, "I can't do it." "Get up, lady. I can't do it." And then she's forced off the bus, right? So I'm a black woman, born in the 50s. I cannot say to Rosa Parks what happened that day. I mean, I'm supposed to know.
right,
okay, I
right.
cannot. So I say, "So you were tired?" She said, "No, I wasn't tired." I said, "Well, your feet hurt." "No, my feet didn't hurt." "Okay, I mean, you had worked all day." "No." "Mrs. Parks, tell me what happened that day." And then she told me a story that was completely different from the trollop we have been told. She was not tired. She was an activist. She was a member of the NAACP. Many other women, mostly women, had not given up their seats. And she said, "This is the day I'm not giving up my seat." So she walked onto the bus, fully cognizant of what was going to happen. She was going to sit down in the white section. The bus driver was going to come over. He was going to ask her 2 or 3 times to get up. He was going to have to call the cops. The cops were going to come. They were going to arrest her, and then she would go off to jail. But the thing that happened that she did not expect was that this delegation of men came to her and said, "We want you to be our example. We want you." That is the only thing she did not expect. And I learned then that even while people are alive, history is distorted because somehow people think it's a better story that she could barely get on the bus, that she could barely sit down. What's wrong with the powerful story? She wasn't a woman who was loud. She was soft-spoken. Even in that day that I met her, she spoke softly, but she carried with her the weight of the history of her people. And so she walked on that bus proudly, and she proudly sat down. I prefer that story. That's the story I like. And that is the story that I learned. And from then on, I have never thought, don't ask, tell me about that day. I always ask that, always. And I always get an answer that I'm flabbergasted by.
That you didn't know.
That I didn't know, that I never could have expected.
Would Rosa Parks also qualify as your favorite interview?
Favorite interview? No.
Who would that be?
That would be these women in Rhode Island who went on strike against their husbands. Yes, they did. This was one of my favorite stories, period.
Okay.
Women don't go on strike against their husbands. And when I say strike, I mean with signs, with picketing.
Outside of their homes?
Yes,
Or what?
because what were their husbands' infractions? He comes home and he just picks up the paper and doesn't say anything to me. Then he comes to dinner, he eats, then he goes back and watches television. That is a universal complaint. That is a universal complaint. And so they went on strike, and they couldn't believe it. They were interviewed by journalists across the world.
How many
of course
them
they were.
How many
There
were
were like 8 of them. They lived in this little cul-de-sac, and they all had been saying, "These dudes, this is not what I signed up for."
Right.
And so the only thing they would do is they would cook for their children, and they would wash the dishes that they and their children used. They didn't wash anything involving their husband.
How long did the strike go?
I don't even remember, but it wasn't to me. They're going to give up. They became celebrities. So I loved those people. That was my favorite story, period. And of course, Rosa Parks, of course.
That says so much about this career and this person. Deborah Horne will, in one breath, remember a group of women just trying to shake up their men, and a woman who shook up mankind.
I like to think that that is a reflection of what I have done in my career, that I have made it so that the governor and the unhoused person, I put them both in the same story, because they're both human beings. They came into the world the same way, and they will exit it, whether or not they want to. And what happens in between, that is truly the measure of our lives. And I hope that I have fulfilled, and I feel I have, for me, what it was that I hoped to achieve.
In her decades-long career, Deborah's reporting always reminds all of us, whether prince or pauper, it is going to be hit and miss. Thanks for watching Hit and Miss. You can find me, Monique Minglavin, on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Links are all on KIRO7.com/hit-and-miss. And next time on Hit and Miss.
What I do remember is the fire just exploding.
A success story none of us wants to experience. A wildfire rages. Firefighter Daniel Lyon gets out. most of him.
As some of them said, my skin was like dripping off of me.
2/3 of his body burned, prolonged pain and rehab you cannot imagine. And in the middle of it all, his big mistake that eventually set him free.
It was always a regret that I have, but it was probably the biggest learning lesson in that moment. And it was very early on, and I can pretty much truly say that from that point on, I never made another complaint.
That's on the next Hit and Miss.